An Ethiopian Airlines flight to Nairobi crashes after takeoff. Nigeria's results for the state elections start trickling in. And South Sudan appealed for funds to help disarm the population. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program, Uganda issues a travel advisory on a ban of goods into Rwanda. And Egyptian water sports lovers in Cairo embrace a new Chinese race boat. We start in Ethiopia, where around 157 people are feared dead after a plane crashed early on Sunday. They include 149 passengers and 8 crew members. Search and rescue operations are currently underway. The flight 302 bound for Nairobi crashed around Bishoftu area 6 minutes after takeoff. It had left Bole International Airport in Addis Ababa at 8:24 a.m. local time. The Ethiopian Airlines is establishing a passenger information center for family and friends who may have been on the plane. Ethiopian Airlines fly to many destinations in Africa and has a good reputation for safety. But in 2010, an airplane crashed in the Mediterranean Sea, killing 90 people on board. Well, let's establish what happened to the airline. For more, we are joined by Mwenda Mbijiwe. He's the CEO of Eye on Security and a former Kenya Air Force officer. Mwenda, thank you for joining us on African Live. What do you think might have happened to the Ethiopian airline?
Firstly, my deepest condolences to the families that could get affected by this. Certainly, heading to Kenya, a couple of Kenyans could have been on board. But this plane is Boeing 737-800 MAX. The word is MAX. This particular aircraft has had, fundamental body frame problems since the manufacture. Earlier on, they had engine problems, prompting the grounding of 21 aircraft as soon as it was launched in 2017. But after they corrected, the French company corrected the engine issues, now they remained with fundamental body frame problems. And experts that I've spoken to even before I came here say the body frame has been overloaded. The avionics, the electricals, the navigation systems. I mean, the aircraft can't bear. And this is, you should note that this is the third aircraft of the same series to crash. The first one was Lion Air in Indonesia that crashed and killed passengers that were on board. Then the Norwegian Air, but the pilot managed in the Norwegian Air to safely land it. And now this is the third. Now this particular aircraft, Boeing 737-800 MAX, has fundamental body frame problems. That's the cause of this crash, certainly. We will hear more, but certainly that could be one of the factors. So
this is the third aircraft of the same series to crash, as you mentioned, and you're talking about fundamental body structure problems for the Boeing 737-800 MAX. So one has to question, though, how many airlines in Africa, though, have that kind of model or that kind of series, and how safe is Boeing?
Luckily, this is a new aircraft. It just came in. It was originally manufactured in 2011, tested in 2016, and then it was licensed by FAA in the United States and sold out from 2018. Suffice to say that the Ethiopian Airline just bought this aircraft 4 months ago. So this is a pretty new product in the market. And I can assure you, not many airlines can afford to buy it at this time or have afforded to buy it this time. Maybe some had placed orders, which I know for sure they will reconsider now, but not many airlines. Kenya Airways doesn't have it. Rwanda Air doesn't have it. So I would assure you, you are safer in a Dreamliner now, the Kenyan Dreamliner flying to New York, than this aircraft. And luckily, we don't have many. We are yet to know what other airlines, maybe the South African Airlines, if they have bought it. But these are pretty new product in the market, and so luckily not many airlines and companies have bought it.
So Ethiopian Airlines, though, has a very good safety record on the continent. It's one of Africa's biggest airlines on the continent. How does the crash affect Ethiopian Airlines?
Certainly, I mean, Ethiopian Airline has had long history of excellent air service. I mean, it's one of the best run airlines in the world. Of course, with very pretty air hostesses, everyone takes note of that. But apart from that, I do not think in the market this crash will affect them as such, except maybe for the Kenyan market, for example. The last week there has been a lot of industrial, labor problems with our airline, with our airport and the airport staff, and a lot of Kenyans and quite a number of people use the international airport in Nairobi may have chosen to fly Ethiopian Air than the Kenya Airways, which has now, labor problems. Now that is going to draw a lot of people in Nairobi and in Kenya who wanted to fly the Ethiopian Air. But basically, Ethiopian Air has a history of safety, and I do not think that this affects their credibility in the eyes of the passengers that have used it. And they are cheap and safe. And this is what makes Ethiopian Air outstanding. And so I simply want to express my condolences to them and the whole management of the airline, and hope that they can find out exactly what happened. In the coming days, of course, we'll see United States, the Boeing company itself being involved in the investigation. The FAA will come in, the NTSA in the United States will come into play to find out exactly what could have happened here. But fundamentally, they may go to the conclusion that the body frame is the problem. And experts, as I finish, experts say this actually could be the last 800 series that the Boeing may consider manufacturing, because they feel 800 MAX stretched the series to the limit. And so Boeing may want to reconsider not even issuing any other 800 series after this MAX problem.
All right, and Wanda Mbijiwe, thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live. Now, China is shifting from cutting debt to boosting growth. The government's work report outlined the change in fiscal policies this year and the central bank's role in that process. Xie Cheng reports from an NPC sideline conference by the People's Bank of China.
China wants a stable money supply for the economy on fiscal steroids. It aims to prevent cash squeeze in the market when business activity rises.
The downward trend of social financing has been tamed. Now, given China's current economic situation, there's still room for reserve requirement ratio cut, but the room is much smaller than in previous years. Overall, the prudent monetary policy tone hasn't changed. We will take a market-oriented approach when it comes to managing interest rates and use supply-side reform to reduce the risk of lending among small companies, to drag down the overall cost of financing in China.
The PBOC has been managing the expectations. It's been telling the market that it cares about jobs and inflation, but not so much about economic stimulus. That gives more room for the fiscal stimulus here, because tax cuts and government spending have a more direct impact on the economy. And there will unlikely be a flood of monetary easing like a decade ago. The central bank has dropped the neutrality of policy to pursue a prudent approach. That leads China to pursue longer debt maturities and long-term bank lending. But if the economy grows slower than expected in the next few quarters, there will be temporary cash reliefs for the market.
This is actually a compromise because using short-term liquidity boost, it can quickly turn into an inflation problem and doesn't really have a good money multiplier effect. So by issuing those long-term bonds, it can potentially support some of the longer-term infrastructure, for example, project, which can span over several years or even a decade. So I think this maturity matching or extending of the loan, extending of the bond, that would potentially benefit to the economy.
China's A shares have seen wild rallies this year, and the bond market is showing rising asset bubble risk. So when will be a good time for the central bank to take actions?
In the first half of the year, I don't see much of the rate cuts happening, precisely because the stock market risk is rising. But around October, especially when it's entering the last quarter, I can see that there might be a lack of momentum because the tax cut, the effect will take about a year to really emerge. Then we might see more of a stimulus then.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Fed has decided not to raise interest rates this year as aggressively as before. That takes off some pressure on the Chinese yuan currency. The big uncertainty, though, is Europe, as the ECB lowers the 2019 and 2020 Eurozone growth forecasts.
For Europe, there were a lot of talks about ending the quantitative easing, but at this stage, with the Brexit still sort of lying in air, then that idea is pretty much coming to an end. So we will continue to see monetary easing in Europe, and that can potentially put some pressure on China in terms of capital outflow. But since we're putting stronger control now, I do not see it has too much impact on China either.
As China prioritizes financial risk control, bank lending will remain the primary source of funding and credit for the economy. That's why analysts expect to see more banks issue perpetual bonds or debt without maturity dates to boost their long-term capital. Xia Cheng, CGTN, Beijing.
A proposal to amend China's foreign investment law is under deliberation in Beijing. The NPC deputies are expected to vote on the draft law next Friday. If approved, it would ban forced technology transfer and further extend intellectual property protections to foreign investments and foreign invested enterprises. Over the past 4 decades, foreign businesses have set up 950,000 enterprises in China. Their investments have totaled more than $2 trillion.
Since China announced a gradual phase-out of all equity caps in the auto sector, BMW AG became the first mover in the industry to secure its Chinese joint venture by increasing its stake to 75%. That is driven by confidence in the burgeoning market.
The market demand was the basis for being successful here in BMW Brilliance. But then, of course, you need the right partners and right shareholders.
And now a unified draft law on foreign investment seeks to strengthen the confidence of more foreign investors. Masato Matsuyama takes charge of the first All Nippon Airways branch in China, and a member of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce in Dalian sees doors opening wider.
The provision that allows businesses to freely repatriate their profits will reduce old restrictions and inconveniences.
And major concerns over equal footing and investment protections are addressed.
Investors will no longer worry about investing in China, as the new law will ban forced technology transfers and better protect the intellectual property rights.
And what's more, the new bill is set to standardize preferential policies made at local levels.
Experts say the new draft law, if passed and enforced, will ensure that foreign investment activities won't be affected by changing and unguaranteed local policies. And they add that the new system will provide a more stable and predictable environment.
In Dalian's Jingpu New area, that will benefit over 5,000 foreign firms.
We will intensify efforts to attract foreign investments according to the new law and national free trade zone policies. It's giving confidence to investors while also improving the quantity and the quality of our foreign capital, boosting regional development.
By November 2018, the total of 950,000 foreign-funded companies had become an indispensable driving force of the Chinese economy. To continue the momentum, it remains to be seen how the well-intended initiatives will play out in practice. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Dalian, Liaoning Province.
Well, let's return to our headline story now, where around 157 people are feared dead after a plane crashed early on Sunday en route to Nairobi from Addis Ababa. They include 149 passengers and 8 crew members. Search and rescue operations are currently underway. The flight 302 bound for Nairobi crashed around Bishoftu area 6 minutes after takeoff. It had left Bole International Airport in Addis Ababa at 8:24 a.m. local time. The Ethiopian Airlines is establishing a passenger information center for family and friends who may have been on the plane. Ethiopian Airlines flies to many destinations in Africa and has a good reputation for safety. But in 2010, an airplane crashed in the Mediterranean Sea, killing 90 people on board. Well, let's cross over now to CGTN's Girum Chala. He's in Addis Ababa for us. Girum, tragic news there. Ethiopian Airlines flight between Addis Ababa and Kenya's capital, Nairobi, crashing early Sunday. What are the details?
Well, Beatrice, as you've said, it's a very tragic news that came out of Addis Ababa from this morning. As you have also said, Ethiopian Airlines 737 aircraft has left the capital Addis Ababa Bole International Airport 8:30 at local time in the morning. Destination Nairobi, Kenya. 149 passengers, 8 crew members were on board. 6 minutes into the air, the tower has lost connection, and we have heard finally that the plane has crashed. It's believed that all passengers on board were killed due to the accident, but this is not confirmed yet. Ethiopian Airlines is now, having people on the ground where the crash has happened, about 50 kilometers from the capital, Addis Ababa, and they're trying to perhaps, rescue people who might have survived that crash. And we also know that Ethiopian Airlines is also establishing an information center to perhaps, make information available for family members of those who were on the plane. It's a shocker here, Beatrice. So what we know so far is that Ethiopian Airlines is trying to know what really went wrong.
Girum, how is the airline dealing with this incident? Ethiopian Airlines is one of Africa's biggest groups here. How is the airline dealing with this?
So Ethiopian Airlines is known to provide one of the best services, not only in the continent, but globally at the same time. Safety has never been much of a concern for passengers who are using Ethiopian Airlines, because the airliner has one of the youngest fleet number of planes, and also its MRO service, the technicians and others are world class. That's what we know so far. That has been the track record. And also the reason why Ethiopian Airlines is one of the most successful airliners in the continent, the most profitable one at the same time. Now, this shocking news, Ethiopian Airlines is also trying to, perhaps, as I was saying earlier, trying to avoid more casualties due to the crash. If there are survivors on the ground, they have sent experts and investigators at the same time. Also here at Addis Ababa Bole International Airport, providing information for family members and for those who would like to know what happened is also being done. So they are perhaps managing it somehow very well. Ethiopian government has, by the way, issued a statement through the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed expressing condolences for those who might have lost their lives, and the family members especially. And we have also heard that President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, has sent condolences messages to the people of Ethiopia, all those families who have lost their lives, Beatrice. So far, this is what we know.
And what do we know about the next process, Girum? What next?
Well, Ethiopian Airlines knows how to manage accidents, and we've seen, as you've also said before, there was a crash on Comoros years back. It killed so many people. That was a plane which was hijacked by then, and other small incidents at the same time. But all in all, the track record is good. Now, with regards to the current situation of the plane crash, what is going to happen next is the people who went on the ground, including the investigators and the rescue operators on the ground, should come up with some kind of information so that that information can help, then it can lead to the next stage of management. Ethiopian Airlines should inform people one step at a time, every single minute, updating family members who might have lost their loved ones, or if there are survivors at the same time. But the next important thing for Ethiopian Airlines, according to the management I spoke to earlier, is to have safety on the ground. Nobody knows what really went wrong. There are so many speculations, including technical issues. So safety is first, and they're trying to work on that 24/7 and from the accident onwards. So we shall see what they're going to do now, but we know that they are working around the clock to make sure that information is available and also rescue operation is underway.
Girum Chala joining us there with that tragic news from Ethiopia. Thank you. Let's now go to Nigeria, where results for the state elections have started trickling in. Vote tallying is also said to be ongoing in some areas. Nigerians took to the polling stations on Saturday to elect 29 governors and 36 state assembly members. The vote comes 2 weeks after the country held presidential elections, which saw President Buhari being re-elected. It is expected to be a straight fight down party lines between Buhari's All Progress Congress party and the opposition People's Democratic Party. Observers say low voter turnout could impact negatively on the outcome of the elections. Let's now cross over to CGTN's Deji Badmus for more on the election there in Nigeria. He's joining me live from Lagos. Deji, what is the latest on the governor's election in the country?
Well, Beatrice, at the moment, collation and announcement of results are actually going on across the 29 states where a governorship election took place. So that's basically what is happening now. The results are being collated. Now, after the collation, there would be a formal announcement now from the various electoral officers from these 29 states. So that's exactly what's happening at the moment.
Deji, there have been reports, though, of attacks on polling stations. How free and fair would you say this election has been? And it's been quite contentious than the presidential vote in Nigeria. Why is this the case?
Well, first is this, the presidential election you could describe as less of a local election. This is more of a local election where the candidates are directly known to the electorate. So usually governorship election and even local government elections are actually contentious. So it's no surprise that we've seen some of the incidents that we've actually witnessed. Now, in terms of how much impact that would have on the process, we just have to wait and see. Some of the incidents that have been reported, not actually widespread, I must say. In some states, in quite a number of states, election had gone on peacefully and quite transparently. Now, it's only when the results are finally announced that one would be able to make a categorical statement as to how how free and fair the elections have been, if they've actually reflected the will of the people of the state. But you look at the process yesterday, you could say, well, to a large extent, it was peaceful. But, of course, there were isolated cases of violence and attacks here and there, which, of course, I would say not unexpected, given the fact that it's a local election, and usually local elections here are quite contentious.
And security has been an issue, as you've mentioned, though. How is this going to affect the outcome?
Well, there's no question at all that some people have actually complained. At the end of the day, what we're going to see is that those who would lose the election will definitely complain that security probably that the security actually worked against them. It just might be one of the grounds that we would see when some of these, those who would lose this election now head to court, because you can expect that quite a number of people would head to court. It's normally the case after elections of this nature. But by and large, I would say the security agencies at least conducted themselves very well, even though there were reports of cases where, for instance, soldiers opened fire on a ballot box snatcher. But that was, of course, an isolated incident. But we just have to wait and see until the entire process is concluded. But, of course, I can tell you, Beatrice, whoever loses, I mean, those who lost would definitely complain. Some of them are already complaining that in some cases that the security agencies were used against them. But, it's always the case. We just have to wait until the process is concluded. But definitely, when some of them head to court, it will be one of the grounds that they would be heading to court for.
All right, Deji Badmus for us there in Lagos, Nigeria. Let's now head to South Africa. The government is working tirelessly to ensure that land claims by communities who are forcibly removed from their property as a result of apartheid-era legislation are settled swiftly and the claimants receive compensation. That's according to South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. He was speaking in Pretoria on Saturday while officiating at a land restitution ceremony. The ceremony marked the successful claims by a number of communities. CGTN's Lisan Jamela has more.
South Africa's government recognizes that the wounds of land dispossession will never be fully healed. The scars remain, but a lot could be done to ease the pain. Hence, the government is making a concerted effort to redress the injustices of the past. On Saturday, land claims totaling 203 million rand were handed over to the land claimants and beneficiaries. The groups lost their land when they were abruptly and forcibly removed from their properties by the apartheid government. At the time, the government was enforcing the much criticized and resisted 1913 Native Land Act. The president acknowledged many South Africans have waited way too long for the process of land restitutions and compensation.
We are today celebrating the settlement of 10 land claims in Gauteng that were lodged before 31st December 1998. Many of our people have waited for far too long for this process of land restitution and compensation to be completed. I know that you've waited for many, many years and waited for this day to arrive. But this day is now here. We are putting right what was done wrong in the past.
Ramaphosa told the beneficiaries that although the government is redressing the past, much more needs to be done to fast-track the process.
We are working to ensure that where it is possible to return the land to claimants, and where they want to return to the land, that we provide the necessary support to enable them to make productive use of the land. This is an important part of correcting the extremely skewed pattern of land ownership and land use in our country.
Many of the beneficiaries are still in disbelief. The land of their forefathers has been returned.
They removed us so painfully. We could go back home. We are so grateful to President Ramaphosa. We're grateful to our government. The land of our fathers is back. It's back.
And the 9 other restitution settlements celebrated, the claimants chose to receive financial compensation.
Allow me to acknowledge with gratitude the hard work and the perseverance of the Land Claims Commission, acting on our behalf of the government of the Republic of South Africa.
Ramaphosa also gave an assurance that government will embark on intensive land tenure reforms to make sure South Africans have their land in their hands. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Stay with us.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tunisia's Health Minister Abdel Rauf El Sharif has resigned after 11 babies died in hospital. The babies mysteriously died within 24 hours at a maternity clinic in the capital, Tunis. The state has launched investigations into the cause of the deaths, which were likely due to a blood infection. Tunisians have been complaining about a decline of state services since the ousting of former President Ben Ali in 2011. The government of South Sudan is asking international donors for funds to help launch disarmament of the civil population. Decades of civil war, prior to independence in 2011 and another war which began in 2013, combined with a lack of government control in parts of the country, has led to proliferation of small arms and light weapons in the hands of civilians. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Sebit Charles has had this gun for 5 years. He is not a member of any organized armed forces in South Sudan. He has no license to possess the weapon, but he says he will keep it.
Even if thieves or what these people who are called unknown gunmen come, and when you call the government cannot respond on time. So I think it is good for me to own a gun to protect. Because when they come, I will fire one bullet up, and then they will run.
This is one of the common types of weapons found in South Sudan. It's very easy to use. You just have to open this, which is a safe cock, and after cocking, when you pull the trigger, the bullet goes off. And researchers say almost half the population of South Sudan are armed. South Sudan is also home to many cattle keepers who sometimes raid each other's animals. They arm themselves to protect their animals.
We have been in war for 40 years. And in all these wars, whether when we were in one Sudan, civilians were actually acquiring arms. And that is why you see these arms have not been collected.
The African Union Peace and Security Council says it's now working on a protocol to silence guns in Africa by next year. Guns from South Sudan also find their way into other East African countries.
We have identified that the proliferation of small arms and light weapons is the cause of the fragility, and therefore we have to address the issue of small arms in South Sudan.
Juba hopes international support will be followed by the collection of light weapons and small arms from the civil population, but Sebit Charles believes he should only be disarmed if the program is for the whole country. He worries being disarmed will leave him vulnerable to those who still have weapons. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Meanwhile, the UN Special Representative for South Sudan, David Shearer, says the country's peace agreement has been holding. He said the remaining challenge now was how to maintain the momentum of the peace pact. Addressing the UN Security Council, Shearer highlighted recent positive developments, including people expressing a willingness to return home, dozens of meetings held across the country, and a significant decrease in levels of political violence. He noted that the timetable set out in the agreement was well behind schedule, citing procedural issues as the main barrier. Shearer called on the Council to join regional bodies to convince all opposition movements to join the peace process in South Sudan.
There are some who believe that a return to violence is inevitable. We don't concur. This agreement has broader buy-in from parties than the 2015 agreement. It is widely embraced by the population. We too have concerns about the peace process, but there is yet to be a perfect process. For our part, the UN has and will continue to focus attention and resources on making it work. And I want to stress there is no plan B. There is only plan A, this agreement and this path forward. And for it to have a chance to work, it needs to be supported.
Well, let's return to our headline story on that Ethiopian Airlines crash from Addis Ababa to Nairobi. Kenya's Minister for Transport, James Macharia, is currently addressing the press. Let's listen in.
But in the meantime, we have initiated through Kenya airports emergency responses to basically take care of relatives and friends who may be affected and who were to receive the passengers upon arrival to Nairobi. The flight was expected to arrive in Nairobi at about 10:35 this morning. At this stage, what we've done is to establish 2 emergency centers, one in what we call Terminal 1D, whereby we shall be meeting the relatives and friends who were to meet the passengers upon arrival. Upon arrival at T1D, those relatives and friends will be directed to the second emergency center, which has been set up at Sheraton 4 Points, which is within the vicinity of the airport. The purpose of these centers is to provide the relatives, who we call meeters and greeters, with information as much as we have. At the same time, to provide them with an environment of privacy. Because until we know what has happened, of course there will be a lot of anxiety affecting friends and relatives affected. We are still waiting for the manifest. So at this point, I can tell you the 149 passengers, their nationalities. We don't have the details about which countries they came from. We don't have information about the gender of those passengers. But upon getting that information, which, as you know, the primary source of that information will be Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines and, of course, the Ethiopian government do have the primary responsibility. The airline, but also the Ethiopian government, because the incident happened in Ethiopian airspace. What we are doing ourselves is to provide as much support as is required. And that's why we have activated the emergency responses here at the Jomo Kenyatta Airport as we are waiting for that additional information. At this point, what is critically important is to ensure that those families and friends of those passengers on board are accorded the highest level of privacy as we wait for more information. And hence, that's why
Kenya's Minister for Transport, James Macharia, briefing the public on the Ethiopian Airlines crash. The Boeing 737-800 MAX plane crashed early this morning en route from Addis Ababa to Kenya's capital, Nairobi. We're going to take a short break now, but when we return, Uganda issues a travel advisory on a ban of goods into Rwanda.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Uganda's government has issued a travel advisory to the business community on the movement of goods into and out of Rwanda. Last week, Rwanda blocked products from Uganda from entering its territory in a move that has strained relations between the East African neighbors. According to the Ugandan Prime Minister, talks are underway to resolve tensions. CGTN's Michael Baleke has the latest.
Uganda's Trade Minister is advising trucks carrying cargo from Uganda to enter Rwanda via the Mirama Hills and Chanika border crossings. Delivery vehicles heading to the DR Congo have been encouraged to use the exit points between Uganda and the DR Congo. Normally, cargo trucks heading to the DR Congo town of Goma prefer going through Rwanda as opposed to the longer route through western Uganda. The Prime Minister of Uganda has told Parliament that the two governments are in contact with a view to resolve the impasse.
Government will give a report to this August House on what this situation is and how it has been finally resolved.
This week, Parliament tasked the government to explain the standoff with Rwanda. Legislators argued that while Rwanda has given its reasons for the border closure, Uganda remains tongue-tied.
This is a matter of life and death. The moment there is an escalation between the two sides, you don't know what is going to happen to your citizens, and the government is just hiding its head.
Hundreds of cargo trucks remain stranded at Uganda's border crossing with Rwanda. Many are from Uganda. Others originated from Kenya's port of Mombasa en route to Rwanda, Burundi, the DR Congo, and Tanzania. This area in downtown Kampala is often congested with trucks delivering grains and cereals from Rwanda. But business has slowed down in the last 1 week, with many dealers here counting losses. Fred Mesgwa deals in beans, but he says prices are being pushed up as supplies run low.
We get a lot of tonnages from there, like 20 trucks per week. They are coming from Rwanda, Kampala. And the means they are taking a lot of trucks to Rwanda, like 50 trucks per week. Yes. No business. All that is at standstill.
Amid the frustration and uncertainty, the Ugandan government is urging the business community to keep calm as tensions are addressed. And while commerce is at the heart of the dispute, the Ugandan Trade Minister stressed the free movement of Ugandans to and from Rwanda remains unrestricted. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
For many African nations, tourism could be a major driver of income and development in years to come. They're showing off what they have to offer at a major international tourism fair in Germany. But there are many challenges ahead, from developing infrastructure and overcoming security concerns. Ira Spitzer reports from Berlin.
More than 180 countries, each trying to paint themselves as the perfect holiday destination. Berlin's massive ITB Travel Expo is a mecca for the multi-trillion-dollar global tourist industry. For the African nations here, it's an opportunity.
Tourism is very important to Kenya's economy. It creates jobs. It's 9% of the job creation. It's also now jumped from 10% to 14% of the GDP.
Kenya welcomed a record 2 million international tourists last year after seeing numbers plummet due to terror attacks several years ago. Overall, Africa hosted 58 million tourists, 5% of the global market, led by South Africa and Morocco.
From pristine beaches to cultural experiences, like seeing the centuries-old tradition of East Africa's Maasai people up close, the continent has no shortage of the things that international tourists are looking for.
But security is still a concern. More than 20 people died in a terror attack in Nairobi in January, and several countries are dealing with internal conflicts. Infrastructure is another issue, with connections more difficult than many other travel destinations. Western and Central Africa in particular have struggled to attract tourists, but the potential is clearly there.
Africa is certainly one of our trendy travel destinations at the moment. It's very popular in Germany. Most people begin with South Africa.
She says that after that first visit, her guests usually want to see more of Africa. The tour operators here hope visitors to the fair feel the same way and are ready to experience the real thing. Ira Spitzer, CGTN, Berlin.
In other news we are following for you today, a group of Senegalese women have been raising awareness about irregular migration challenges. They used poems and traditional dances to illustrate the dangers faced by illegal migrants. Take a look.
Women migrants who have returned to Senegal got a chance to share their experiences in this event organized by the International Organization for Migration. Ndeye Fatou Sall worked as a maid in Saudi Arabia for 8 years.
When you go there, you will have a contract. It is a Saudi who has to make your contract. His name will be on your papers. When you get to the airport, first of all, you lose your dignity because they take your passport. Over there, you already lost your dignity. Then you're not allowed to leave the airport until the boss comes. He will come take your passport and take you like it was slavery, like you are sold.
Here, for example, it's the women who push their husbands, it's the women who push their children, it's the women who push their brothers, and it's the women who push their cousins, uncles, and others to leave the country. And it's the women who even push their daughters to leave the country.
Many Senegalese have died trying to flee the country in search of a better life.
It's more difficult for women to share their migration stories because they can be stigmatized. But some do engage, speak on the radio, and participate in these activities.
The awareness campaign hopes to especially reach out to mothers to discourage their children from dangerous migration acts. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
In Côte d'Ivoire, a young blogger is gaining attention for being among the top 50 influencers in her country. Her social actions through digital technologies have earned her a spot as one of the most important figures in Côte d'Ivoire's digital sphere.
I have always been passionate about science fiction and everything that stems from it, such as movies, technology, futuristic sciences, robots, and many others. While studying economics, I started working with my sister who was in audiovisual production. And as I was working with her, I discovered the internet. Then I discovered blogs. And that's how it all started, in 2005 and 2006.
Edith Braw's simple, fast, and fun platform has attracted many subscribers. She is one of Côte d'Ivoire's digital pioneers. In 2011, she founded the first women's webzine after she became president of the Bloggers Association of Côte d'Ivoire. Her social networks boast a community of more than 50,000 people. Through her notoriety, Edith has also founded a startup, producing her own projects.
My company is an agency that manages social networks including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and many others for companies. We also provide public relations management for our clients. We do brand content or personal branding.
Edith has won several awards, including the 2018 ICT Women's Digital Entrepreneurship Special Award. As a web activist, she and her partners aim to promote the emancipation of women through digital technology.
This is really not the time for us women to stand back. We have role models, we have examples. This is the occasion for us to seize this opportunity, because no one will come to hold our hands and lead us to development and empowerment. There are already women who are doing well. We may not necessarily work with them, but we can be inspired by what they do. And today Edith is one of them. Many do not work with her, but she is a model from which one can learn to become an influential woman in future as well.
Digital technology has a major impact on women's empowerment. It is a multiplying factor. Women now have the opportunity through a tool such as the telephone and internet to train and learn new skills from the comfort of their homes and even try new recipes.
Through her foundation, she hopes to support and train young women in the field of ICTs. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Egyptian water sports lovers in Cairo embrace new Chinese racing boats.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa African club football returned on Saturday with Cote d'Ivoire's ASEC Mimosas claiming a 2-0 win at home to Wydad Casablanca. The Ivorian club boosted their chances of qualification to go level with the Moroccan side on 7 points in Group A. The Egyptian Giants luckily were stunned away by Florent Ibenge's AS Vita 1-0. JS Saoura underlined their dominance in Group D with a 2-0 victory over Simba of Tanzania, while Mamelodi Sundowns have all but booked their ticket to the next round with a 3-0 win over Lobi Stars. In Egypt, a new sport is taking over the Nile by storm. Recently introduced in the North African country, the Chinese dragon boat has increased in popularity over the years, attracting more young Egyptians seeking to find a niche for themselves in this fast-growing sport. Adil Mahrouri went along for a boat ride on the River Nile and now reports.
In weekends, many look forward to breaking their work schedule and wake up late. But not for these paddlers. Shortly after the sun rises, they head to Egypt's River Nile, preparing themselves for a breathtaking experience. It's time for their dragon boat training. The Chinese sport has been recently adopted by the Egyptian Canoeing Federation, which has been a platform for it to spread.
The dragon boat had started spreading among the young people only like 4 years ago. And surprisingly, we had found that it had become very popular among the amateurs. It's very interesting, very competitive. Besides that, they consider it to be like an exotic sport, not like any other sport.
Dragon boat focuses on synchronized team paddling. Unlike other water sports, paddlers are guided by the beat of a drum. Infused by Cairo's magnificent landscape on the Nile, it gives the fleet a unique pleasure.
That's the novelty about Dragon Boat. It has everything. I mean, actually, we've won a couple of competitions, first place. And so it gives you the competition, it gives you the fitness, it gives you the team spirit. And you really come out of this feeling much better and totally relaxed. It's like you've, I mean, I know it's hectic and it has a lot of physical, activity in it. However, it gives you the same effect of yoga. Since I set foot in the Dragon, I've become addicted.
Up to 12 paddlers can fit in the dragon boat, which makes teamwork in the sport exemplary. It mainly depends on core muscles, lifting much of the pressure classic rowing puts on the knees.
It's easier for people to learn it because, as you can see, you can just put your oar and take a stroke. But if your oar is connected to the boat like this, maybe in rowing, and you all sit behind each other, if one person stops, the other one have to stop as well. But in Dragon Boat, if you stop, you can just put your oar like this and other people can just keep going without it.
Because it's still a young sport, Dragon Boat's expansion in Egypt is quite challenging. There isn't yet the experience or the capacity to manufacture the boats or its accessories domestically.
Can we say that at the current stage we're still in Egypt at the amateur stage of the sport?
Yes, this is very true.
What are your plans?
We're working at making it popular through introducing it to other clubs and other academies as well. So other people, once you have like 3 or 4 or 5 clubs have these boats, so the races become more aggressive. So people will like it more. Whenever things become